Hello and welcome to part 2 of our video summarizing all you need to know about Napoleon Bonaparte. My name is Sarah and today we are going to cover the rise to power of Napoleon, following the first part about his early life. This video is really useful, especially if you are studying French history as part of your courseworks or exam, as I'll get into the details you need to know to get top marks. So let's get started. Upon graduating from the prestigious École Militaire in Paris in September 1785, Bonaparte was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the artillery regiment. He served in Valence and Auxonne until after the outbreak of the Revolution in 1789, and took nearly 2 years' leave in Corsica and Paris during this period. At this time, he was a fervent Corsican nationalist. He spent the early years of the revolution in Corsica fighting in a complex three-way struggle among royalists, revolutionaries, and Corsican nationalists. He was a supporter of the Republican Jacobin movement, organizing clubs in Corsica, and was given command over a battalion of volunteers. He was promoted to captain in the regular army in 1792, despite exceeding his leave of absence and leading a riot against a French army in Corsica. He returned to Corsica and came into conflict with the Corsican leader Pasquale Paoli, who decided to split with France and sabotage the French assault on the Sardinian island of La Maddalena. Bonaparte and his family fled to the French mainland in June 1793 because of this conflict. Bonaparte was promoted to Brigadier General at the age of 24, catching the attention of the Committee of Public Safety. He was put in charge of the artillery of France's Army of Italy. He devised plans for attacking the Kingdom of Sardinia as part of France's campaign against the First Coalition. The French army carried out Bonaparte's plan in the Battle of Sorgio in April 1794 and then advanced to seize Armia in the mountains. From there, they headed west to outflank the Austro-Sardinian positions around Sorge. After this campaign, he was sent on a mission to the Republic of Guinea to determine that country's intention towards France. Then on to his rise as a military leader. So following the fall of Robespierre and the Thermidorian reaction in July 1794, Napoleon, although closely associated with Robespierre, was released from the arrest within 2 weeks. He was asked to draw up plans to attack Italian positions in the context of France's war with Austria. He also took part in an expedition to take back Corsica from the British, but the French were repelled by the British Royal Navy. In October 1795, royalists in Paris declared a rebellion against the National Convention. Paul Barras, a leader of the Thermidorian reaction, knew of Bonaparte's earlier military exploits and gave him command of the improvised forces in defense of the convention in the Tuileries Palace. Napoleon had seen the massacre of the King's Swiss Guard there 3 years earlier and realized that artillery would be the key to its defense. He ordered a young cavalry officer named Joachim Murat to seize large cannons and use them to repel the attackers on October 5, 1795. 1,400 royalists died and the rest fled. The defeat of the royalist insurrection extinguished the threat to the convention and earned Bonaparte sudden fame, wealth, and the patronage of a new government, the Directory. He was promoted to commander of the interior and given command of the Army of Italy. During the French Revolutionary Wars, Napoleon was successful in a daring invasion of Italy. In the Montenot campaign, he separated the armies of Sardinia and Austria, defeating each one in turn, and then forced a peace on Sardinia. Following this, his army captured Milan and started the siege of Mantua. Bonaparte defeated successive Austrian armies under 3 different leaders while continuing the siege. The next phase of the conflict featured the French invasion of the Habsburg heartlands. In the first encounter between the two armies, Napoleon pushed back his opponents and advanced deep into Austrian territory. The Austrians were alarmed by the French thrust that reached all the way to Leoben, not very far from Vienna, and finally decided to sue for peace. The Treaty of Leoben, followed by the more comprehensive Treaty of Campo Formio, gave France control of most of northern Italy and the Low Countries, and a secret clause promised the Republic of Venice through Austria. Bonaparte marched on Venice and forced its surrender, ending 1,100 years of independence. He also authorized the French to loot treasures. In the Italian campaign, Bonaparte's army captured 150,000 prisoners, 540 cannons, and 170 standards. The French army fought 67 actions and won 18 pitched battles through superior artillery technology and Bonaparte's tactics. During the campaign, Bonaparte became increasingly influential in French politics. The Royalists attacked Bonaparte for looting Italy and warned that he might become a dictator. Bonaparte also sent General Pierre Augereau to Paris to lead a coup d'etat and purge the Royalists on September 4th. This left Barras and his Republican allies in control again, but dependent on Bonaparte, who proceeded to peace negotiations with Austria. These negotiations resulted in the Treaty of Campo Formio, and Bonaparte returned to Paris in December as a hero. He met Talleyrand, France's new foreign minister, who served in the same capacity for Emperor Napoleon, and they began to prepare for an invasion of Britain. Bonaparte decided on a military expedition to seize Egypt and thereby undermine Britain's access to its trade interest in India. Bonaparte wished to establish a French presence in the Middle East with the ultimate dream of linking with Tipu Sultan, a Muslim enemy of the British in India. In May 1798, Bonaparte was elected a member of the French Academy of Sciences. His Egyptian expedition included a group of 167 scientists, with mathematicians, naturalists, chemists, and geodesists among them. Their discoveries included the Rosetta Stone. General Bonaparte and his expedition eluded pursuit by the Royal Navy and landed at Alexandria in July. In August, the British fleet under Horatio Nelson captured or destroyed all but 2 French vessels in the Battle of the Nile, defeating Bonaparte's goal to strengthen the French position in the Mediterranean. In early 1799, he moved an army into the Ottoman province of Damascus. Bonaparte led 13,000 French soldiers in the conquest of the coastal towns of Arish, Gaza, Jaffa, and Haifa. The attack of Jaffa was particularly brutal. Bonaparte discovered that many of the defenders were former prisoners of war, ostensibly on parole, so he ordered the garrison and 1,400 prisoners to be executed by bayonet or drowning to save bullets. Men, women, and children were robbed and murdered for 3 days. Bonaparte began with an army of 13,000 men. 1,500 were reported missing, 1,200 died in combat, and thousands perished from disease. He failed to reduce the fortress of Acre, so he marched his army back to Egypt in May. To speed up the retreat, Bonaparte ordered plague-stricken men to be poisoned with opium. The number who died remains disputed, ranging from a low 30 to a high 580. He also brought out thousands wounded men. The 18th of Brumaire. So, after Habsburg-controlled Austria declared war in 1799, France returned to a war footing. Emergency measures were adopted, and the pro-war Jacobin faction triumphed in the election. With Napoleon and the Republic's best army engaged in the Egypt and Syria campaign, France suffered a series of reverses in Europe. The coup of '30 ousted the Jacobins and left Emmanuel Joseph Sieyès, a member of the five-man ruling directory, the dominant figure in the government. As France's military situation improved, the Jacobins feared a revival of the pro-peace royalist faction. When Napoleon returned to France in October, both factions hailed him as the country's savior. Despite the failures in Egypt, Napoleon returned to a hero's welcome, which convinced Sieyès he had found the general indispensable to his planned coup. However, from the moment of his return, Napoleon plotted a coup within the coup, ultimately gaining power for himself rather than Sieyès. Prior to the coup, troops were conveniently deployed around Paris. The plan was first to persuade the directors to resign, then to get the Council of Ancients and the Council of 500 to appoint a pliant commission that would draw up a new constitution to the plotters' specifications. The plan succeeded. On the morning of 18 Brumaire, Lucien Bonaparte falsely persuaded the councils that a Jacobin coup was at hand in Paris and induced them to depart for the safety in the suburbs, while Napoleon was charged with the safety of the two councils and given command of all available local troops. On the same day, 3 of the 5 directors resigned, which prevented a quorum and thus practically abolished the directory. The 2 remaining directors protested but were arrested and forced to give up their resistance. By the following day, the deputies of the councils realized that they were facing an attempted coup rather than being protected from a Jacobin rebellion. Faced with their recalcitrance, Napoleon stormed into the chambers, which proved to be the coup within the coup. From this point, it was a military affair. Both chambers resisted, but under the pressure of the events, they succumbed to the demands of the plotters. Following that, the Mediterranean campaign of 1798 was a series of major naval operations surrounding a French expeditionary force sent to Egypt under Napoleon Bonaparte that serves as a bridge between the War of the First Coalition and the War of the Second Coalition. The French Republic thought to capture Egypt as the first stage in an effort to threaten British India and thus force Great Britain to make peace. Departing Toulon in May 1798 with over 40,000 troops and hundreds of ships, Bonaparte's fleet sailed southeast across the Mediterranean Sea. Napoleon became the first consul for 10 years, appointing 2 consuls with consultative voices only. His power was confirmed by the new constitution of the year 8, originally devised by Sieyès to give Napoleon a minor role, but rewritten by Napoleon and accepted by direct popular vote. The constitution preserved the appearance of a republic, but in reality established a dictatorship. The constitution of the year 8 was adopted on December 24, 1799, and established the form of government known as the consulate. The constitution tailor-made the position of first consul to give Napoleon most of the powers of a dictator. It was the first constitution since the Revolution that did not include a declaration of rights. The new government was composed of 3 parliamentary assemblies: the Council of State, which drafted bills, the Tribunate, which debated bills but could not vote, and the Legislative Assembly, which could not discuss the bills, but whose members voted on them after reviewing the Tribunate's debate record. The Conservative Senate was a governmental body equal to the three aforementioned legislative assemblies. However, the Senate was more of an executive body as it verified the draft bills and directly advised the First Consul on their implications. Popular suffrage was retained but mutilated by the list of notables. The term notables, commonly used under the monarchy, referred to prominent and more affluent men, landholders, merchants, scholars, professionals, clergymen, and officials. The people in each district choose a slate of notables by popular vote. The First Consul, Tribunate, and Corps Legislatif each nominated one senatorial candidate to the rest of the Senate, which chose one candidate from among the three. The executive power was vested in three consuls, but all actual power was held by the First Consul, Bonaparte. Napoleon vetoed Sieyès' original idea of having a single Grand Elector as supreme executive and head of state. Sieyès had intended to reserve this important position for himself, but by veto. However, Napoleon never intended to be part of an equal triumvirate. As the years progressed, he moved to consolidate his own power as First Consul and leave the two other consuls, Jean-Jacques Régis de Cabacérès and Charles-François Lebrun, Duc de Plaisance, as well as the assemblies, weak and subservient. By consolidating power, Bonaparte was able to transform the aristocratic constitution of Sieyès into a dictatorship. On February 7, 1800, a public referendum confirmed the new constitution. It vested all the real power in the hands of the First Consul, leaving only a nominal role for the other two consuls. More than 99% of voters approved the motion according to the released results. While this near unanimity is certainly doubtful, Napoleon was genuinely popular among many voters, and after a period of strife, many in France were reassured by his accomplishments in the War of the Second Coalition and his talk of stability of government, order, justice, and moderation. He created the impression that France was governed once more by real statesmen and that a competent government was finally in charge. The Constitution was amended twice, and in each case, the amendments strengthened Napoleon's already concentrated power. The Constitution of the year 10 made Napoleon First Consul for life. In 1904, the Constitution of the year 12 established the First French Empire with Napoleon Bonaparte, previously First Consul for life, with wide-ranging powers as Napoleon I, Emperor of the French. The Constitution established the House of Bonaparte as France's imperial dynasty, making the throne hereditary in Napoleon's family. The Constitution of the year 12 was later extensively amended by the Additional Act, after Napoleon returned from exile on Elba. The document virtually replaced the previous Napoleonic constitutions and reframed it into something more along the lines of the Bourbon Restoration Charter of 1814 of Louis XVIII, while otherwise ignoring the Bourbon Charter's existence. It was very liberal in spirit and gave the French people rights which were previously unknown to them, such as the right to elect the mayor in communes with populations fewer than 5,000. Napoleon treated it as a mere continuation of the previous constitutions, and it thus took the form of an ordinary legislative act. Additional to the constitution of the empire, Napoleon's government quickly became an authoritarian one-man system, but he surrounded himself with talented and skilled collaborators and experts and supported a merit-based system in the military. Most of the time, Talleyrand worked for peace so as to consolidate France's gains. He succeeded in obtaining peace with Austria through the 1801 Treaty of Lunéville and with Britain in the 1802 Treaty of Amiens. He could not prevent the renewal of war in 1803, but by 1805 opposed his emperor's renewed wars against Austria, Prussia, and Russia. He resigned as foreign minister in 1807, but retained the trust of Napoleon and conspired to undermine the emperor's plans through secret dealings with Tsar Alexander of Russia and Austrian minister Metternich. Talleyrand thought a negotiated secure peace so as to perpetuate the gains of the French Revolution. Napoleon rejected peace, and when he fell in 1814, Talleyrand took charge of the Bourbon restoration based on the principle of legitimacy. The services of talented politicians were so important to Napoleon that he was able to force his collaborators to work above their own political differences and personal animosities. Arguably, the second most important person in his government, Joseph Fouché, was Talleyrand's opponent. Yet the two served together under Napoleon. Fouché was careful to temper Napoleon's more arbitrary actions, which at times won him the gratitude even of the royalists. Fouché was thought to have saved the Jacobins from the vengeance of the consulate, and Bonaparte decided to rid himself of a man who had too much power to be desirable as a subordinate. On the proclamation of Bonaparte as First Consul of Life, Fouché was deprived of his office of Minister of Police. After the proclamation of the First French Empire, he again became head of the reconstituted Ministry of Police, and later of Internal Affairs, with activities as important as those carried out under the Consulate. His police agents were ubiquitous and the terror that Napoleon and Fouché inspired partly accounts for the absence of conspiracies after 1804. The two remained distrustful of each other, and by the end of Napoleon's rule, Fouché, seeing the fall of the emperor to be imminent, took measures to expedite it and secure his own interests. In strengthening the machinery of state, Napoleon created the elite order of the Légion d'honneur, signed the Concordat, and restored indirect taxes as an act seen as a betrayal of the revolution. He centralized power in Paris, with all the provinces governed by all-powerful prefects he selected. They were more powerful than royal intendants of the Ancien Régime, and had a long-term impact on minimizing regional differences and shifting all decisions to Paris. The French taxation system had collapsed in the 1780s, one of the key factors leading to the revolution. Napoleon instituted a modern, efficient tax system that guaranteed a steady flow of revenues and made long-term financing possible. He also reformed the army, most notably the system of conscription created in the 1790s, which enabled every young man, regardless of his economic or social background, to serve in the army. Consequently, the army expanded rapidly. Before the revolution, the aristocracy formed the officer corps. Now promotions was by merit and achievement. It was assumed that every private could reach the ranks of the officer. Of permanent importance was the Napoleonic Code, created by eminent jurists under Napoleon's supervision. Praised for its Gallic clarity, it spread rapidly throughout Europe and the world, marking the end of feudalism where it took effect. The code recognized the principles of civil liberty, equality before the law, and the secular character of the state. It discarded the old right of primogeniture and required that inheritances be divided equally among all the children. The court system was standardized, and all judges were appointed by the national government in Paris. Napoleon also resolved most of the outstanding problems resulting from the complex history of religious tensions and conflicts in France. He moved the clergy and large numbers of devout Catholics from hostility to the government to support for him after the Catholic system was re-established by the Concordat of 1801. That allowed the church return to normal operations. The church lands were not restored, but the Jesuits were allowed to return and the bitter fights between the government and the church ended. Protestant, Jews, and atheists were tolerated. So that's all. If you found this video useful, give it a thumbs up and do subscribe to our channel where we offer free material that you can use as part of your studies to really get a better grasp of specific areas you might find challenging. Make sure to visit our website where you'll find useful revision guides, model answers, and tools to get top marks. Thank you for listening.